is someone that is sent from. So he says, a servant isn't greater than his master. What the master says, the servant does. And likewise, the apostle, he's not greater than the one who sent him. So we should do as our master did, and we should go where the one who sends us has sent us. That's all he's saying. And what do we glean from that? One thing, submissiveness. What he's trying to teach us here is how important is submissiveness. Let me say that another way, and that is with the word obedience. You cannot study the new covenant. You cannot encounter the teachings of Messiah and not understand the importance of obedience and submissiveness in your life. And what we're going to find out in the weeks to come is that through this obedience, through demonstrating humility and submissiveness, that's where two things are going to come. One is power and authority, one word in the Greek language, exousia. But in English, we need to use two words to understand that concept. So we're going to have authority and power, and you know what else? He's going to speak extensively in the weeks to come about how when one submits, how when one obeys, how when one follows Messiah. You know what the outcome is? A joy. And not just any joy, a joy that is complete. And that's what he's trying to share with the disciples. A principle, a pattern of life, how we should live, in order that God moves in our life and brings about what he wants to achieve in us and through us, and that is that we become different, that we become profoundly different in this world, that we manifest his glory. So once again, look at verse 16. Truly, truly, I say to you that a servant is not greater than his Lord, nor an apostle greater than the one who sent him. But if these things you know, now this is a strong word for know. It's not simply a cognitive knowledge, but it's an experiential one. That you know, you have seen, that you've experienced the truth of these things. But that's not enough. Not just knowing the truth, but notice what he says. He says, but you are happy if you do them. And we need to pay close attention to that word, happy. Why is that? Well, this word in the Greek language, it speaks of two qualities. Not just happiness, but also this idea, this concept of being blessed. In the Hebrew language, in fact, the afternoon prayer in the synagogue begins with the word ashrei. And ashrei means happy or blessed. What man? The one whose Lord is God. That's where blessing and happiness comes from. So Messiah chooses the Greek word that is the same meaning when he says, you know, it's not enough that you know these things, that they're confirmed inwardly. He says that you're going to be blessed and happy if you do them. Then he goes on and says, you know, not concerning all of you have I spoken, for I know whom I have chosen. Now, he's going back to something, and that is Judas Iscariot. He's going to emphasize that this one is truly not an obedient disciple. Look again. We read here in verse 18. Not concerning all of you I have spoken, but I know whom I have chosen. But in order that the scripture might be fulfilled, the one who eats with me from the bread. Now, pay very close attention. There is a change. We talked about two different biblical words for eating. One word is the word estheo, and it means to eat as a human being eats. And especially in the scripture, we find it very different than the world, what the world thinks. This word estheo in the Greek language, and by the way, in Hebrew, there's just one word. We can't make that distinction. You know, many times people ask me, do I believe that the New Testament, all the New Testament, was written in the Greek language? I do. In fact, I'm very disturbed by those individuals that think that Greek is somehow an inferior language, a pagan language. First of all, let me respond to such a perspective this way. If someone is saying, you know what, I don't put too much in what's written in Greek because that's a pagan religion. I want to follow Hebrew because I'm from a Jewish background, or because I just have believed that that is a superior language. Well, let me tell you, Judaism doesn't say that. If you look, for example, in the Talmud at the second Megillah, where it speaks about the book of Esther, and there's laws for reading the Torah and reading the Megillah in the synagogue, what you'll find is this. The ancient rabbis, the sages, they say that there are 3 languages where God has and will reveal biblical truth. And what are those 3 languages? Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. Now, the Old Testament primarily was written in Hebrew, but there are a few chapters, not many, a few chapters, and outside those chapters there's a few words which are Aramaic. But the New Testament, it's Greek. And Judaism says that Greek is a language that God has used and will use for the purpose of revelation. The second thing we need to realize is this. Those individuals say, well, it's clear that the background for the New Testament is Hebrew. They make it off some false assumptions. What is that? Well, because there are word plays, not many, but a few, in the Gospels. And it's clear that these word plays only work in the Hebrew language. So they say, that proves it. No, it doesn't. What it proves is this, that they were speaking Hebrew. But when it came to writing it down, it was in Greek. And what I want you to see here is that only the Greek language can convey the truth that the Scripture is conveying to us now. Look again in our text. We're in verse 18, the second half. He's speaking about the one who's going to betray him in order that the Scripture might be fulfilled. And he says, the one who eats with me. Now this expression, with me, it's to teach us something. You see, eating in the Scripture has to do with fellowship. But this one's a false disciple. This one's a liar. This is the one who's going to betray him. So instead of using the normal word for eat, which implies fellowship, which implies a eating different from the animals. Why do we eat? Well, if you look, for example, at the book of Deuteronomy chapter 8, it says, when you have eaten your food and are satisfied, you bless the Lord your God for the good things that He has provided, primarily the land that He has provided. So eating is for the purpose of praising God. And that word for eating in the New Testament is estheo. This is not. This is the word trogo, which is different. It usually outside of the biblical language, that is, outside of the Greek New Testament, this word trogo has to do usually with an animal eating. That is, they eat for one reason, not for fellowship. They eat to satisfy their needs. They eat for a physical life. And what this text is saying is this: Judas is a deceiver. He's giving an outward expression that he wants to be close with Messiah, that he wants to have fellowship with Messiah, so he eats with him. But in actuality, that is deception. It's falsehood. He's doing that because he knows that he's going to shortly betray him. And Messiah, none of this is a surprise to him. We read here, Messiah is speaking, the one who eats with me from the bread, now this would have been matzah, but the word lechem or artos in Greek, it can mean regular bread or unleavened bread. And there's a very important text that Yeshua quotes. He says, the one who eats with me, and here again, not for fellowship, but this word eating out of a fleshly, a carnal, an animalistic behavior. In fact, how we would understand